How to develop self-knowledge and emotional intelligence. To talk about self-knowledge and emotional intelligence is not to repeat fashionable phrases scattered across books and social media posts. It is to touch the silent root of everything that governs your choices, your reactions, your silences, and the way you carry yourself when no one else is watching. Who are you when the lights are off and the masks are gone? What makes you rise from bed in the morning? Which emotions do you insist on hiding, even from yourself? And when was the last time you dared to ask, with sincerity, what you truly feel? Self-knowledge is not a destination, it is an endless journey. You can spend your entire life peeling back layers of who you are, discovering how you react and uncovering what you truly desire. Have you noticed how often you think you know yourself until life surprises you with a situation in which you react in ways you never imagined? And then you ask yourself, do I really know who I am? Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize those reactions, embrace those emotions, and use them as a compass rather than a prison. How many times have you been overtaken by anger and said words you could never take back? How many times have you buried your sadness in silence, only to find it transforming into something heavier, sharper, and darker? If you could learn now to deal with what you feel instead of running from it, what choices would you make differently, starting today? When was the last time you feared rejection, and what did you do in that moment? Did you act as your authentic self, or did you wear a mask in the hope of being accepted? True self-knowledge demands courage because it reveals not only your strengths, but also the shadows you have spent years trying to hide. Would you have the courage to look within without filters, without excuses, without the justifications you always use to defend your mistakes? What would you discover if you stripped away the stories you tell and stood in the rawness of yourself? Many confuse emotional intelligence with coldness. But it is not about denying feelings, it is about refusing to be dominated by them. When was the last time an emotion overtook you so strongly that it commanded your body, your words, and your relationships? If you could return to that moment, would you choose differently? What would it feel like to use your emotions not as explosions, but as messages? Could fear become a signal of where you need courage? Could anger reveal the boundaries you must finally protect? Could sadness remind you of what you value most deeply? Self-knowledge also means recognizing your triggers. Do you know what yours are? Can you identify which situations make you anxious? Which people awaken insecurity in you? Which words reopen old wounds you thought were healed? If you could map every one of those triggers, wouldn't you have far greater freedom in choosing your responses? After all, how can you overcome what you cannot even name? And beyond yourself, emotional intelligence is also about understanding others. How many times have you judged someone for the way they reacted, without ever imagining the invisible storm they were carrying inside? How many times have you grown irritated with someone's silence without realizing that silence was their only form of defense? If you had seen beneath the surface, would you have judged them the same way? What would change in your relationships if you began to look past the mask of behavior and into the emotion underneath? Self-knowledge asks for deep questions. Emotional intelligence asks for deep listening. Do you truly listen to the people around you, or do you simply wait for your turn to respond? And what about yourself? Do you hear your inner voice, or has the noise of your routine drowned it out? If you could truly hear yourself, what would you learn about your desires, your fears, and your needs that you have been neglecting? You might ask, where do I begin this journey? And the answer is simple: by observing. Observe what you feel without punishing yourself. Observe what you think without judging yourself. Observe what you do without excusing yourself. Have you practiced that lately? Or do you usually react on autopilot, unaware of the chain of thoughts and emotions behind your response? When was the last time you paused before answering someone, breathing deeply, and choosing words not to win an argument, but to build understanding? If in the first part we turned inward to see how self-knowledge begins with observation and courage, now we need to go deeper. How do you transform awareness into practice? Because awareness without application is like a map never used. It shows the way but takes you nowhere. Have you noticed how easy it is to say, "I know who I am," but how difficult it is to act in alignment with that knowledge? When was the last time you actually made a different decision because of what you discovered about yourself? Self-knowledge without practice is self-deception. It creates the illusion of growth without its reality. How many people do you know who speak endlessly about spirituality, about self-improvement, about becoming a better version of themselves, and yet their lives remain locked in the same loops? What they lack is emotional intelligence, the ability to apply what they know in the heat of real life. How many times have you told yourself, "I won't react that way again," only to find yourself repeating the same reaction days later? How many times did you say, "I've learned my lesson," only to realize the lesson wasn't learned at all because it never became action? That is why emotional intelligence is less a concept and more a muscle. It requires training. And the first exercise is the pause. When was the last time you stopped yourself for just 5 seconds before reacting? Can you imagine how many arguments would have dissolved? How many friendships would have been preserved? How many relationships would have healed if you had simply breathed before speaking? How many regrets in your life were born not from what you felt, but from the way you expressed it? Another practice is learning to name your emotions. Do you truly know how to distinguish frustration from sadness? Can you tell when anger is covering fear, or when anxiety is nothing more than disguised insecurity? How often have you misread your emotions and ended up hurting the wrong people? What would your life look like if you developed the precision to say not just, "I'm upset," but "I'm afraid of being left behind," or "I feel unseen," or "I need reassurance"? Wouldn't that clarity change every conversation? And what about vulnerability? How many times have you hidden behind a mask of strength, pretending you were fine when you were breaking inside? When was the last time you admitted you needed help? Do you allow yourself to be human in front of others, or do you only show the polished version of yourself? Can you imagine the freedom of saying, "I don't know, I can't do this alone, I need you"? What would happen to your relationships if you dared to speak that truth? Would they weaken, or would they deepen beyond anything you've ever known? Self-knowledge is also about knowing your triggers. You may not control what others do, but you can control how you respond if you already know what awakens certain emotions in you. Do you know which situations push you into anxiety? Which words make your body tighten? Which gestures reopen old wounds? And if you could recognize those patterns in real time, would you not suddenly gain the power to choose differently? Why continue to be surprised by the same pain when you could prepare to meet it with strength? But emotional intelligence doesn't stop with yourself. It extends to others. Have you ever noticed how quickly we judge someone's reaction without considering the story behind it? That colleague who snapped at you, was it really about you or about the weight they were carrying at home? That friend who pulled away, was it rejection or their own battle with exhaustion? How often have you taken things personally when they were never personal at all? And if you could see people not as enemies, but as humans in pain, wouldn't your world become a softer place? Another practice, values. Self-knowledge means knowing what you stand for. Do you know what values truly guide your choices? Or are you still living according to scripts handed down by family, culture, or fear of disappointing others? When was the last time you said no to something because it violated your values? And when was the last time you said yes to something terrifying because it aligned with your deepest truth? What would your life look like if every decision was rooted in what you value most, not in what others expect? Let's also talk about mistakes. How many times have you punished yourself more than the mistake deserved? How many nights have you replayed old failures as if they were proof of your unworthiness? What if you stopped seeing mistakes as final sentences and started seeing them as teachers? Can you imagine how much lighter life would feel if every error became a lesson instead of a life sentence? And what if your so-called failures were actually pointing you toward the exact skills you need to build emotional intelligence? And forgiveness, do you practice it with yourself? Or do you still carry the weight of old guilt that shapes your present? Who have you not forgiven, and how much of your energy is still chained to that moment? What would it feel like to release it now? Can you imagine waking up tomorrow without dragging that weight behind you? Conflict is another arena where emotional intelligence is tested. How many times have you preferred to win the argument rather than save the relationship? How many times have you chosen silence not out of wisdom, but out of fear? Can you tell the difference between silence that frees and silence that enslaves? If you learned to express yourself without aggression but also without submission, how much more peace would you have in your relationships? But here's the challenge. You cannot control others. Have you noticed how often you try anyway? How many times have you attempted to bend someone into the shape you needed them to be, only to end up frustrated? When was the last time you let go and allowed people to be who they are, while choosing to take responsibility only for your own feelings and actions? Wouldn't life feel lighter if you stopped carrying what was never yours to carry? And beware. Self-knowledge is not an excuse for selfishness, and emotional intelligence is not manipulation. Have you seen people use the phrase, "that's just who I am," to justify their toxic behavior? That is not self-knowledge, that is avoidance. When you truly know yourself, you don't weaponize that knowledge to hurt others. You use it to grow. Be honest. Are you using your awareness as a shield for your mistakes or as fuel for your evolution? And what about time? Do you give yourself patience in your growth, or do you demand perfection overnight? How many times have you given up on change because you stumbled once or twice? What if the stumble wasn't proof of failure, but evidence of progress? Isn't persistence the truest sign that you are evolving? How many seeds have you abandoned just before they sprouted because you couldn't stand waiting? What would happen if you stayed long enough to see the fruit? At the core, self-knowledge and emotional intelligence are daily choices. Are you willing to observe yourself today, to question the stories you've been repeating, to sit with your emotions instead of running from them? Growth is not found in the past or the imagined future. It is found here, in the present moment, where you decide to face yourself as you are. And here comes the most provocative question. Who are you when no one is watching? If you could answer with absolute honesty, what would you say? If you could strip away fear, what would you discover? And if you could embrace every part of yourself, even the ones you reject, what kind of freedom would you feel? What if true power doesn't lie in controlling others, but in controlling yourself? How many conflicts in your life could have been avoided if you had known yourself better? How many arguments could have ended in connection instead of silence if there had been enough emotional intelligence to turn anger into dialogue? How many doors did you unknowingly close simply because you couldn't manage what you were feeling? Life has already shown you many times that running from yourself does not work. So why do you keep trying? How many times have you filled the emptiness with distractions, addictions, shallow relationships, all to avoid looking within? If you had the courage to face that emptiness in silence, what would it reveal to you? What truth are you most afraid of discovering about yourself? And when we talk about emotional intelligence, we cannot forget empathy. When was the last time you genuinely put yourself in someone else's place? If it were you who had failed, would you not want to be understood rather than condemned? If it were you who had reacted poorly out of exhaustion or fear, would you not want someone to see beyond your reaction? And if so, why don't you extend that same grace to others? Self-knowledge means asking yourself every day, who am I now? Because with every experience, you are transformed. Are you still the same as yesterday? Or have you already shifted, even if just a little? If you could notice your daily changes, would you not value yourself more? Would you not celebrate the small victories you usually overlook? When was the last time you cried? And what did you do afterward? Did you hide? Or did you allow yourself to feel until the pain softened into clarity? When was the last time you smiled without reason, simply because you were at peace with yourself? What do those moments reveal about who you really are beneath the surface? Perhaps the greatest challenge of self-knowledge is that it has no end. You will never arrive at a point where you can say, I know everything about myself. And maybe that is beautiful, because each phase of life reveals new dimensions of you. What did you discover about yourself at 15, and at 30, and now? Which truths remain the same, and which ones have already dissolved into dust? Emotional intelligence is what allows those discoveries not to crush you, because to know yourself can be painful. Are you prepared to face what you will find? What will you do when you discover something in yourself you dislike? Will you deny it, hide it, or will you transform it into strength? And what if I told you that self-knowledge and emotional intelligence are not luxuries but survival? How many people do you know who destroyed relationships, careers, and even their health because they could not handle their own emotions? Do you want to be one of those people, or do you want to learn how to transform your feelings into allies? In the end, everything comes down to this. Are you willing to see yourself fully, to accept your fragilities without shame and your strengths without guilt? Are you ready to realize that your anger can be transformed into courage, that your sadness can be transformed into sensitivity, that your anxiety can be transformed into preparation? What would change in your life if you believed that even your most feared emotions had something to teach you? We have reached the deepest point of this journey, turning self-knowledge and emotional intelligence into a way of living. Awareness without transformation is wasted potential. Reflection without action is a comfortable illusion. What good is it to recognize your fears if you keep running from them? What good is it to understand your anger if you continue to let it control your words and destroy your relationships? When was the last time you truly applied what you know about yourself in a way that altered the direction of your life? Self-knowledge is not meant to end in you. It must expand outward into how you touch the lives of others, into how you contribute to the world. Emotional intelligence is not a decorative trait. It is the bridge between your inner reality and your outer behavior. Are you ready to cross it, or are you still content to build theories about yourself while your life remains the same? The real question is this: do you have the courage to live aligned with who you truly are? How often do you still perform roles that don't belong to you? How many times have you smiled when you wanted to cry? How many times have you said, "I'm fine," when you were breaking inside? And if today were the day you stopped performing, what would change immediately? Would you still be surrounded by the same people? Would you still pursue the same goals? Or would everything rearrange itself once you finally chose authenticity? Self-knowledge is to accept your humanity whole, without edits. It is to admit that you carry anger, but also tenderness, that you feel envy, but also admiration, that you live with fear, but also courage. Can you allow yourself to feel all of it without shame? Or do you still believe certain emotions are forbidden, signs of weakness to be hidden? Who taught you that feeling was weakness? Isn't it the opposite? That to feel deeply is proof of your strength. Emotional intelligence prevents those emotions from becoming your masters. You can feel anger without becoming its weapon. You can feel sadness without drowning in it. You can feel fear without letting it paralyze you. When was the last time you allowed yourself to sit with an emotion without letting it dictate your choices? And what if you did that daily, letting emotions speak but not command? How much freer would you become? Have you noticed how many people fear silence? Because silence strips away distraction. Silence reveals truth. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be alone, without a phone, without music, without anyone else, just you breathing, listening? What did you hear there? And if silence is the key to hearing your soul, why do you keep running from it? Deep self-knowledge requires facing your shadow, not shadow as evil, but the parts of yourself you hide. Do you know what yours are? Do you know the aspects of yourself you fear others will see? What if those parts, instead of being monsters, were seeds of power waiting for your acceptance? What if what you reject most in yourself is exactly what you need to embrace? Wouldn't your shadow transform into strength once brought into the light? And what about the shadows of others? Emotional intelligence is tested not in your calm, but in their chaos. When someone acts aggressively toward you, can you see the pain behind their anger? Or do you match them with equal fire? When was the last time someone hurt you, and instead of reacting, you saw their fragility? How different would your life feel if you could see people not as their weapons, but as their wounds? Self-knowledge without action becomes stagnation. Emotional intelligence without empathy becomes manipulation. The balance is to unite them both, to know yourself and then to act with consciousness, responsibility, and care. Ask yourself, how can I use what I know about myself to serve others better? How can I turn my pain into bridges instead of walls? Notice how most people spend their lives desperate to be understood, but rarely commit to understanding others. What if you reverse this? What if, instead of demanding that people understand your wounds, you chose first to understand theirs? How would that shift your relationships? How many conflicts would dissolve if both sides cared more about listening than about defending themselves? Vulnerability is the highest form of strength. When was the last time you revealed your truth without fear of judgment? How many connections did you miss because you hid behind a mask? What if vulnerability is not weakness, but the door to intimacy, the proof that you are real? Can you imagine what your life would look like if you dared to be fully seen? Self-knowledge and emotional intelligence always come back to choice. You cannot choose what you feel, but you can choose what you do with what you feel. You cannot choose who crosses your path, but you can choose how you react. You cannot control circumstances, but you can control the meanings you attach to them. If you could choose a new way of living right now, what would it be? Would you continue repeating old patterns, or would you create a new story? The true test is not what you do when people are watching, but what you do when they aren't. That is where self-knowledge is proven. In the quiet moment, you choose truth instead of performance. In the silent moment, you choose integrity over applause. Can you stay loyal to yourself in the dark? Emotional intelligence is proven in the fire. When someone provokes you, betrays you, disappoints you, who is in charge then? You or your emotions? When was the last time you chose peace over war? And if peace was not submission but victory, isn't that the highest demonstration of mastery? So the question is not, how do I develop self-knowledge and emotional intelligence? The question is, are you willing to live differently? Are you willing to know yourself so deeply that you cannot fit into small roles anymore? Are you willing to feel so deeply that emotions can no longer enslave you? Are you willing to love so fiercely that you no longer lose yourself in need? Are you willing to live so fully that you no longer waste the present moment? Because self-knowledge is not about inventing who you should be. It is about remembering who you already are. Emotional intelligence is not about controlling others. It is about liberating yourself from the control of your own emotions. And life is asking for this from you right now. Will you answer? If these words reached you, don't let them remain only as reflection. Write in the comments right now. I choose to know myself and live with emotional intelligence. Say it as a vow, not a wish. And share with me. What is the very first change you will make today to step closer to the most conscious and free version of yourself? Because your life will not change by accident. It will change the moment you decide to know, to feel, and to live differently. And that moment can be now.